Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are getting back into the news episodes. I've been out for a while off of doing the news and politics, and this is for September 1st, Monday, 2025. Now, with that said, let's jump into this, shall we? First things first, from inequality.org. Trump's invasion of D.C. cost over $1 million a day. What could that fund instead? Deploying the National Guard against D.C.'s unhoused population cost 4 times more than simply providing them housing. And that's true across the country. Trump mobilized the D.C. National Guard under the guise of restoring security in the nation's capital, despite D.C.'s crime rate being at a 30-year low. What began as a deployment of 800 D.C. National Guard troops has grown to encompass 2,091 as of the writing of the article, which I think it was published 25th, so yeah, 25th of August, as Republican governors send hundreds more. Trump hasn't just complained about alleged crime in the district, something he's full of shit about. He's placed a target on people experiencing poverty and homelessness, claiming that we're getting rid of the slums. Trump has called on troops and police to forcibly remove unhoused people from the city. So, he's getting rid of the things that are good, like the actual departments that work to try to help people. And he would rather lock people up or kick them out of the city because they're poor, they're homeless. Yeah, he's a shitbag. Let's be fucking honest about it. He's a shitbag. He is not a human being, and definitely not a good one if you want to call him that. From ProPublica, Alaska vowed to resolve murders of indigenous people. Now it refuses to provide their names. When the nonprofit Data for Indigenous Justice filed public records request with the Alaska Department of Public Safety concerning cases it had investigated, the state rejected them. Charlene Peekapok is the executive director of Data for Indigenous Justice, a nonprofit that requested a list of every Alaskan Native murdered in the state over the past 3 years. The state says it doesn't collect that information. Leaders in Alaska and elsewhere have repeatedly promised action in recent years to address the nation's chronic failure to solve the murder or disappearance of indigenous people. Federal legislation backed by Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski called for improving data collection and information sharing among law enforcement and tribes. Governor Mike Dunleavy said again and again, and as recently as May 5th, that the state government would work with Alaska Natives to address the crisis. My administration will continue to support law enforcement, victim advocacy groups, Alaska Native tribes, and other entities working together to solve these cases and bring closure to victims' families. This was something he said just last year. Yet, when an Alaska Native group asked state law enforcement officials in June for one of the most fundamental pieces of data needed to understand the issue, a list of murders investigated by state police, the state said no. So they said they would, but of course, they lie. I mean, the indigenous people in the U.S. have gotten the short end of the freaking stick so many times, it's ridiculous. Alright, we have some emails. This is from Washington Post. I got it. War plan for Gaza circulating within the Trump administration envisions voluntary relocation of entire population. It's not clear that the 38-page prospectus, which calls for turning Gaza into a trusteeship administered by the United States for at least 10 years while it is transformed into a tourism resort and manufacturing hub, is what President Donald Trump, who has vowed to take over the enclave, has in mind. But major elements of it, according to two people familiar with the planning, have designed to make real the president's vision of a Riviera of the Middle East. You know, no, what you could fucking do is force an end of this massacre that's going on, because it's not a war. It hasn't been a war for a long damn time. And you could enforce steps to actually help the people. Anyway, this is also Washington Post. More than 600 dead in earthquake in Afghanistan, officials say. The Taliban-run Interior Ministry said more than 1,500 others were injured after the 6.0 magnitude earthquake struck eastern Afghanistan. Damage and casualties were reported across the region, and the quake was felt in Kabul and neighboring Pakistan. So yeah, this is a very recent one, as you can see, 17 hours ago. So shrink, thank you. This is from Status Quo. Will the politician who sabotages justice for Flint finally pay the music? No agents had ever seen this shit before. An FBI source familiar with Flint criminal investigation told us about fraud that Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel buried. She was just subpoenaed over alleged wrongdoing. Although the national media stopped covering or caring about the poisoned people of Flint long ago, Status Quo has continued to report on the ongoing water crisis and cover-up that has crept into its 11th year. Been over a decade now since this story broke. Cancer is surging in the city. The water is still contaminated. Teen suicides are on the rise. Their brains were damaged by lead as young children. Sick residents have still not received a dime from the $600 million legal settlement, and no politician or private fraudster has gone to prison. On the latter, as I've extensively reported and exposed in my award-winning book, We the Poisoned, exposing the Flint water crisis cover-up and poisoning of 100,000 Americans, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel single-handedly sabotaged justice for Flint residents by, as a candidate for Attorney General in 2018, publicly condemning the ongoing criminal investigation that, based on reporting, was flipping defendants in former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder's administration to turn on those politicians higher up the food chain, and was building a historic criminal case against Snyder himself for involuntary manslaughter for his role in poisoning Flint. As a candidate, all but vowing to fire the independent Flint water special prosecutor who had successfully forced the two top Michigan health officials to face trial for involuntary manslaughter. As a result of her publicly hinting that if victorious she would overhaul the criminal investigation, criminal defendants who were cooperating went silent, refusing to cooperate, knowing that the prosecutors had struck deals with whereabout to were about to be canned. Yeah. Upon entering office, she fired Special Prosecutor Todd Flood, Chief Investigator Andy Arena, and the majority of the original Flint investigative team. As Jordan broke in The Guardian in 2022 and further exposed in We the Poison, Flood and Arena were close to filing a massive financial fraud RICO case against government officials over the water privatization scam that caused the Flint water crisis. Nessel let it go. The late Flint councilman Eric Mays told me about Nessel's abandonment of the RICO case after firing the team who was actively pursuing it. Was it the lack of political or legal will? Cannot say. Upon firing experienced prosecutors and investigators, based on my reporting based on political vendettas and pettiness, Nessel appointed replacements for whom sources within her office told me were amateur prosecutors who had never tried a case before a jury. These prosecutors quickly became overwhelmed by the case, which involved corruption and crimes at all levels of government: federal, state, city, country, I think it's supposed to be county, private foundations, and Wall Street banks. Nessel inexplicably dropped criminal charges against 8 state and city officials, citing vague issues with the cases and the original prosecution team's methods. Of the charges she dropped, several were financial fraud charges related to a fraudulent bond deal that allowed a nearly bankrupt Flint to borrow nearly $100 million to help finance a completely unnecessary new water system, KWA, against several state and city officials. A year and a half later, Nessel recharged many of the officials for which she had dropped charges against with the same exact charges or lesser charges. As part of this, she charged former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, who, based on my reporting, knew and helped cover up Flint's deadly Legionnaire's disease outbreak at least 16 months before he notified the public, with a misdemeanor. The Legionnaire's outbreak killed an untold number of Flint residents. Sources indicate it could be as many as hundreds. Despite warnings of the risk from some within her office, Nessel's team used a secretive one-man grand jury process to pursue Flint indictments rather than a public pre-trial. After criminally charged state and city officials challenged Nessel's office's use of a one-man grand jury, the Michigan State Supreme Court unanimously ruled it unconstitutional and tossed out Nessel's Flint criminal cases. As a result, Nessel announced the end of the Flint investigation in 2023. On top of all this, Nessel's office, I believe with her involvement, lied to yours truly, Jordan, the writer of all this, is in response to Freedom of Information Act request he submitted to the AG's office seeking critically important documents that, based on high-level sources, would expose unknown corruption related to the privatization scam that caused the Flint water crisis. The timeline of which I explained in an email I sent to the Michigan House Oversight Committee and is posted at the bottom of the story. Infuriatingly, especially to the poisoned people of Flint, Nessel has never been held accountable for essentially sabotaging any chance of criminal justice criminal justice residents had. Until now. Sort of. In a bipartisan vote, the 17-person Michigan House Oversight Committee, including 7 Democrats, voted unanimously to subpoena Nessel to testify in front of the committee over 2 non-Flint related alleged scandals. The Michigan House Speaker, Jay DeBoyer, accused Nessel of stonewalling the Oversight Committee's repeated requests for documents. Nessel is under fire for 2 separate cases. The first involves how her office handled a campaign finance complaint and criminal referral against nonprofit Bipartisan Solutions, which is a major funder to the Fair and Equal Michigan Ballot Committee. Nessel is gay. Fair and Equal is an LGBTQ plus rights group for which Nessel's wife was co-chair. Nessel is accused of meddling in the case in order to help Bipartisan Solutions. The other case involved Nessel's alleged meddling in a criminal complaint involving former Michigan Democratic Party treasurer and personal injury attorney Tracy Kornak. According to Pulitzer Prize-winning Michigan journalist Charlie LaDuff, Kornak, who is a friend of Nessel's, was accused by the director of a West Michigan nursing home of using the account of her elderly brain-damaged client to fraudulently bill an insurance company for nearly $50,000. Nessel, who implemented a so-called conflict wall over the investigation to prevent any appearance of her involvement in her friend's case, was accused of improperly meddling anyway and pressuring investigators to close the investigation. Needless to say, at the time, where Democrats and Republicans can agree on whether the fact that a 17-member House Oversight Committee unanimously across party lines voted to subpoena Nessel indicates something smells really rotten in the Attorney General's office. Now, will they actually hold her accountable? We don't know. But hopefully she is held accountable. But yeah, check them out. Status Coup is the name of the organization. Lots of great stuff that is often missed or ignored by most news organizations. I have a sign up from Justia talking about the U.S. Court of Appeals Fourth Circuit opinions for something a little more in the line of the courts. The Fourth Circuit is pretty much where I live, so that's why I chose it. But we get some cases: Lefebvre versus the County of Fairfax, Virginia, dealing with constitutional law; Landholt versus Corley, government and administrative law; and Hollis versus Morgan State University, dealing with labor and employment law. August 27th, constitutional law, Judge Albert Diaz, Lefebvre versus County of Fairfax. 3 individuals who are the lawful gun owners challenged a Fairfax County, Virginia ordinance that prohibits the possession, carrying, or transportation of firearms in certain locations. The main 2 restrictions at issue are a ban on firearms in county parks and a ban in public spaces, where or near where a county permitted event is taking place. The plaintiffs argued that both restrictions violate the Second Amendment and the event's restriction is unconstitutionally vague under the 14th Amendment. The U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia reviewed the case. It denied the plaintiff's motion for a preliminary injunction and later granted summary judgment to Fairfax County and its chief of police. The court found that both restrictions were consistent with the Second Amendment's sensitive places doctrine, and that the event's restriction was not unconstitutionally vague. An appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit reviewed the district court's summary judgment, ruling de novo. The Fourth Circuit affirmed the district court's decision regarding the park's restriction, holding that the ordinance is constitutional in at least some applications, specifically as applied to preschools located within county parks. The court relied on Supreme Court dicta indicating that bans on firearms in schools are presumptively constitutional. However, the Fourth Circuit vacated the district court's judgment regarding the events restriction, concluding that the plaintiffs lacked Article 3 standing to challenge it because they did not demonstrate a credible threat of prosecution or a concrete intention to violate the restriction. The case was remanded with instructions to dismiss the claims related to the event's restriction without prejudice. But they got a couple other court cases. But I just wanted to show y'all that some of the other stuff I get and look at. So, yeah. Because I try to keep myself up to date on a lot of stuff. And so, the court cases and stuff is interesting to me in that regard. Did you stop at? There we go. And from 1440, covering the flight of SpaceX's Starship program, Harvard University's first professor to lose tenure since the 1940s, and much more. Starship takes a spin. SpaceX carried out the 9th test of its massive Starship space vehicle last night. When was this article? The 28th of May. So this has been a while. March, April, May, June, July, August. Couple months back. But they talk about launching that. Harvard University's business school professor Francesca Gino had her tenure revoked after the internal investigation found she manipulated data in multiple studies to support her conclusions. Yeah, you gotta be as honest and straightforward if you are dealing with that in the foremost respect. So, yeah. But, yeah. Look at what 1440 news is kind of like. Now we get into Reddit. What happened to supporters of Hitler after he fell from power? Did they all go, oh, I had no idea I was supporting that? Or did they go, oops? Like, what actually happened? As a U.S. citizen watching some extremely concerning behavior emerge more and more often, I can't help but distance myself from my family. In 10-20 years, will they realize the connections I am currently seeing? Did German supporters ever come to terms with the fact that they were cheering for murdering people? They mentioned there's a bunch of old threads that talk about this in Reddit. At the top, I am not a historian of modern Germany, but I am a historian of the modern American extremist racialist right. I have conducted some research on this subject because, like you, I was curious if history has any lessons about how extremist far-right political parties are viewed in retrospect after they have caused clear, visible damage to their supported or supposed supporters. An important caveat, I will solely be discussing attitudes in West Germany, which the historiography basically agrees had a much less intensive program of denazification than did East Germany. There are many reasons for this, but my understanding is that it is primarily boiled down to a combination of more gentlemanly warfare experienced at the officer level on the Western Front and the interest of the Western military powers in having generals and officers on their side who had experience fighting the USSR. There are more than a few public opinion polls conducted by various Allied powers of Germans from 1945 until the present. I'll link the various polls at the end of the comment. One of the most comprehensive surveys of German public opinion in the immediate post-war period. OMGUS gets at early opinion polls, while later information was collected by a mix of government, press, and commercial reports. Summing up the documents I've listed below, in 1945, after having seen their country destroyed and ripped in half, nearly 20 million deaths, and the single largest deindustrialization of any nation in history, a larger percent, around 52% of Germans than that voted for Hitler in 1932, around 30%, believed that Nazism was a good political philosophy. Only a third believed the German people were responsible for the war and deserved the consequences of it. About a third also said they supported Hitler up until the end of the war. A particularly poignant quote from the footnotes of the OMGUS document. In January 1950, as much as a tenth of the nationwide sample rated Hitler as the statesman who had done the most for Germany. In July 1952, a tenth agreed that Hitler was the greatest statesman of the century whose true greatness would be recognized only later, with another 22% feeling that although he made a few mistakes, Hitler was nonetheless an excellent chief of state. The percentage claiming that except for the war, Hitler would have been one of Germany's greatest statesmen was 48% in May 1955. In 1968, 34% of the adherents of the new rightist National Democratic Party indicated that if the opportunity arose, they would vote for a man like Hitler. So it slowly but surely, his approval started to really sink. Some members of the Hitler Youth would rise to prominence in other countries for their publication of Nazi propaganda and go on to develop what we would call neo-Nazi organizations. I would argue there's nothing neo about them, but that's besides the point. Neo, I believe, being Latin for new. It's either Latin or Greek. I can't remember. Anyway, it means new. Men like Ernst Zundel and George Dietz, both childhood members of the Hitler Youth and later emigres to North America, were prominent propagandists in Canada and the US, respectively. Others, born in the years following the Second World War, were revolted by what Germany had done. And found the collaboration between the West German government and the former Nazi Party members to be an atrocity. In the 1960s and 70s saw the rise of active terrorism of groups like the Baader Meinhof gang, who wanted to reject, often violently, any West German association with Nazism and pursue a more rigorous denazification like the liquidations that happened in East Germany. Finally, the reunification of Germany has shown that neither East nor West Germany wholly eradicated affinity for Nazism. A recent Die Welt article on the subject notes the rise in far-right ideologies once again in Germany. So yeah. So we've got to stomp this out hard. Essentially. If we can get common sense people back into power, we have got to stomp out the fascism, Nazism beliefs. But anyway, did I just open up the Reddit here and okay, from Archaeology Magazine. Statues from a sunken Egyptian city re-emerge. Egyptian authorities recently began lifting remnants of a 2,000-year-old submerged city from the seabed of Abu Qir Bay near Alexandria. The endeavor is the first such underwater operation to take place in Egypt in 25 years. Over the past several campaigns, excavations and surveys have identified and mapped the ruins of a Roman-era settlement, which was likely an extension of the prominent Ptolemaic period city of Canopus. Divers have recorded temples, residential buildings, industrial spaces, and a 400-foot-long commercial dock, near which they found the wreck of an ancient merchant ship. Recently, cranes hoisted from the water 3 large statues, including a quartzite sphinx bearing the cartouche of Ramses II, a granite colossus of an unidentified man from the late Ptolemaic era, and a white marble statue of a Roman nobleman, Muhammad Ismail Khaled, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, emphasized Abu Qir's incredible archaeological significance, calling the site a living witness to Egypt's long history. Over time, earthquakes and rising sea levels plunged coastal parts of the Nile Delta, which included Canopus and the nearby port of Thonis Heracleion beneath the Mediterranean Sea. So yeah, there they are, having hoisted up the Roman nobleman statue. Interesting when these places are found. Like I said, I'm always for recovering more of our history. It's what I studied in college, was history. That was my thing. But yeah. Now we get some images from history porn. Finnish anti-tank squad after destroying 26 enemy tanks in 1944. There's the fellas after having destroyed the tank. One of them, the one sitting on top the anti-tank gun, is named Tovio Iomaki. He himself destroyed the most enemy tanks during the war. So yeah. Portrait of Titanic passenger and millionaire Benjamin Guggenheim in 1910. He refused to enter a lifeboat and reportedly asked a steward to inform his family that I played the game straight to the end and that no women were left behind on board the ship because Ben Guggenheim himself was a coward taking a seat. So yeah, he's like, save the women first by all means. Come on up! Sorry about that. Here's an image. Tom Longboat, the first Native American to win the Boston Marathon, 1905. Here's an image. Life magazine published a photo of Malcolm X holding an M1 carbine on March 1964 after he received numerous death threats by the Nation of Islam for exposing Elijah Muhammad for having children with underage girls. We'll do that, and sorry about that. Anyway, where were we? Yeah. Life magazine published a photo of Malcolm X holding an M1 carbine March 1964 after he received numerous death threats by the Nation of Islam for exposing its leader, Elijah Muhammad, for having children with underage girls. So yeah. Next photo. Martin Luther King Jr. welcomed with a kiss from his wife, Coretta Scott King, after leaving court in Montgomery, Alabama on March the 22nd, 1956. Yeah, Dr. King often ended up in court or ended up in jail to try to fight for the rights, even non-violently, because they were determined to make him seem like a regular criminal. Photo of Abdul Wali, an Afghan farmer. In 2003, he was falsely accused of being a terrorist. Hoping to clear his name, he turned himself in to the Americans. A CIA contractor would brutally torture him to death over the course of 3 days, beating him until he begged for death. So yeah, the guy's like, look, I'm not the terrorist. And, good faith. I turned myself in. And what did he get? For trying to be a good person. Yeah. The Afghan and Iraq wars were some of the biggest bullshit. Finally, an image of a German soldier who has returned home from the war only to find his house in ruin and his family perished. And it was from Frankfurt, Germany in 1946. Yeah, you can only imagine. Germany had so many people die. Them and the USSR suffered the most casualties of World War II. The most deaths. So, you survive this horrible, gruesome experience. So many people you've fought alongside have perished. So many atrocities, and you come home and even your past life is gone. Yeah. All right. From The Guardian. The Epstein scandal broadens as a trove of letters from famous figures gets published. New York Times reports on letters by Ehud Barak, Woody Allen, and others written for Epstein's 63rd birthday. So yeah, I already made a video showing how Trump's not going to be able to outrun his ties to Epstein. It'll premiere later this week, but yeah. From the AP, New York Democratic Representative Jerry Nadler says he won't run for re-election in 2026. So this is his last term, huh? Well, 78, I mean, it's about that point to turn it over. A lot of people don't live beyond or even to 78, so yeah. Also from the AP, Trump says he's awarding former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani the Presidential Medal of Freedom. For doing what? Award former Mayor Giuliani Presidential Medal of Freedom. Oh, after he was seriously injured in the car crash? Yeah, he was a good leader on September the 11th, 2001, but he squandered all that goodwill. He really did. From CBC, company behind Jack Daniels says the boycott is significant as sales to Canada fall 62%. And this was from August 30th. So, I mean, this is a pretty recent article. Yeah. The tariffs have more or less screwed everybody over. They really have. From the Independent, RFK Jr., who doesn't have a medical degree, says he can diagnose children just by looking at them. No, that's not how it works. Very rarely, very fucking rarely, does that ever work. And usually, it's only when people have the scientific knowledge and experience. He is such a quack. He should have never been Health and Human Services Secretary. But again, dumbasses were like, oh, Trump. That's how it really fucking feels. From above the law, Congress just deleted habeas corpus from the Constitution on its website. Congress.gov keeps an annotated copy of the Constitution. They have deleted Article 1, Section 9. And of course, habeas corpus is just the idea. You have the right to a speedy trial and representation at said trial. And of course, that's what they're fucking trying to rip from everybody. That right to a trial. It really pisses me off, but I'm so glad I've got copies of the Constitution and my other text. It's where having actual books is useful. You know, shit like this can happen on the internet. Axios. Massive CDC walkout erupts amid internal chaos. Dozens of staff members and leaders of the CDC staged a walkout Thursday in response to the internal shakeup of the top federal officials. Of course, this being another thing by a dumbass in the Health and Human Services Department. He really had no goddamn fucking qualifications. None. From The Guardian. Hundreds of workers over billionaires' Labor Day rallies take place across the U.S. Protests denounce Trump administration's policies and call for the protection of social safety nets. Yeah, he's fucked himself over. If he does lose power, he is so fucked. Because he has pissed so many people off. He's going to drag the goddamn Republican Party down with him. Because right now, as things are sitting, they're not holding the House. Ain't no fucking way. Anyway, from SciPost. Teenager with hyperthymesia exhibits extraordinary mental time travel abilities. Essentially, exact mental recall. Yeah. It's an extraordinary ability to recall personal memories in vivid detail and mentally revisit specific moments in her life at will. It's a rare condition, like we said, known as hyperthymesia, or highly superior autobiographical memory. So that is interesting. Also from SciPost, new psychology research finds leftist causes widely seen as more moral, even by conservatives. People across the political spectrum tend to see left-leaning political causes as more morally compelling than right-leaning ones, according to new research by the European Journal of Social Psychology. The findings, based on 2 studies that were conducted in Spain, indicate that not only do leftist individuals feel a strong moral obligation to defend traditionally progressive issues, such as gender equality and environmental protection, but that conservatives do as well. Conservatives also appear to view their leftist counterparts as more morally principled than the reverse, according to the 2 studies, like I say. These findings provide evidence of a moral asymmetry in political judgment, one that favors progressive causes and individuals in the public imagination. The results suggest that this pattern may shape political polarization and influence how people across the ideological divide perceive one another. Yeah, it basically boils down to don't be an asshole. Oh, this is a image I thought was really interesting. A picture of the Sturgeon moon as it sits behind the top of the Seattle Space Needle, making it look like it's sitting right there. So, yeah, interesting image. From Euronews. Holocaust Memorial in Lyon vandalized with Free Gaza inscription in intolerable act. Look, I'm all for freeing Gaza. I believe it needs to be done. Most of Israel has become ridiculously xenophobic and are just committing a genocide and backing a genocide. But you do not go after memorials that also look at people who suffered. There's a difference that must be upheld there, because they at that point were in the same situation the Palestinians are in now, and it's really despicable. And you don't do yourselves any fucking favors by being these jackasses. But yeah. From KRON 4 San Francisco, tech CEO says AI enabled him to cut 4,000 jobs. Salesforce CEO. This is the kind of shit we did not need as a fucking society. But we're there anyway. Yay! Fucking shit. From France 24, to defend against Russian tanks, Finland and Poland consider restoring wetlands. Considering re-wetting dried out peat bogs to form defense barriers against a potential Russian ground invasion. Restoring the natural carbon sinks could also bring significant environmental benefits. So yeah, I mean, you provide a much tougher terrain for something like tanks to get across, and you know, it actually sucks a lot of carbon and stuff out of the air. That's what they mean by carbon sink. It helps remove a lot of carbon that's not naturally there. From Newsweek, Maduro warns of bloody threat as Trump deploys warships near Venezuela. This was earlier today. Yeah. People kept going, oh, Trump's anti-war. No, he's not. No, he fucking isn't. From Reuters, over 1,000 killed in landslide in western Sudan village. Sudan Liberation Movement and Army says. From DW, agree. Venezuela accuses the U.S. of seeking regime change. I have no doubt, and I agree with them, because we have got some of the most warmongering lunatics in our government. Addressing drug trafficking, my ass. Anyway, let's watch some videos. Rashida Tlaib in a speech. Look at this room, motherfuckers. We ain't going anywhere. And this was when she was telling the people, the pro-genocide crowd, she's like, look, we ain't going anywhere. Because honestly, that pro-genocide crowd has been an evil, evil group.
They thought they could kill us, rape us, imprison us, violently uproot us from our olive tree farms, starve our children to death, and we would disappear. Well, guess what? Now we're in Congress, and we're every corner of the United States. Y'all, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. They will never truly comprehend, Ya Jama'ah, even after 7 decades, that we aren't going anywhere. We are just getting started. I want to say to all of them, every genocide enabler, look at this rooms, motherfuckers. We ain't going anywhere.
I have to agree with her. I mean, Israel's shown nothing but vile, evil behavior. And you have groups that want to protect Zionism in this country. Your AIPACs, your anti-defamation leagues. They're not about protecting people. They're about protecting Zionism. Which is, of course, the belief that Jewish people have a right to reclaim Israel. Motherfuckers. You haven't been in what is now Israel in 2,000 years. It's not a right. It's supposed to be a kindness. But all you show is egotistical assholishness. And, yeah. So, I agree with Rashida completely.
Shown me how to fight for civil rights and justice and against oppression. As an American, this city taught me that the political structures that I have to work in, that we all are surrounded by, was built on slavery and genocide and rape and oppression. Detroit taught me that these institutions will never save us. Detroit will remind me constantly, the community mothers, that it's not the genocide-enabling Congress or the White House that will free our people. It is only us. It can only be us. This is the least we can do is show up. The least we can do to try to save lives. enabling the genocide in Gaza and dismantling the apartheid system that oppresses Palestinians, unifies so many different struggles. You all seen it, for freedom and justice at home and abroad. What's been tested?
The lives that are destroyed, the devastation being committed by Israel, it should tear at your heart. It should make you feel almost sick to your stomach. And that some people are just, yeah, pay me millions, I love it more. There are too many money-hungry people.
On the killing fields of Gaza is already being deployed right here in the streets of America. What our government is willing to do to Palestinians, they are willing to do to all of you. It is no surprise to me, as the daughter of Detroit, that I see our government that has supplied the bombs and excuses Israel from destroying literally every single day hospitals, communities in Gaza, and manufacturing mass starvation, is also the same government that's defunding healthcare and food assistance programs here in our country. It is no surprise.
Yeah, Biden was guilty of a lot, but Trump isn't stopping it. He's only making it worse. Again, part of the reason that the two-party monopoly should be broken. Bernie Sanders says research shows U.S. has paid for 70% of the war of the Gaza. Well, like I said, it's not a war, it's a genocide.
Here is the list. These are the names of children published in the Washington Post today that have been killed by the Israeli military in Gaza. The United Nations reports that more than 18,000 children have been killed since this war began. And I should mention that more than 12,000 of these children were under the age of 12, and more than 3,000 children in Gaza have had one or more limbs amputated. They're seeing innocent people being shot down while they wait online to get food while they are starving. Over 1,000 people have been killed waiting online to get food because they are starving. Despite these war crimes carried out daily and in plain view, the United States has provided more than $22 billion for Israel's military operations since this war began. $22 billion. One estimate based on Brown University research calculates that the United States has paid for 70% of the Gaza war. In other words, American taxpayer dollars are being used to starve children, bomb schools, kill civilians, and support the cruelty of Netanyahu and his criminal ministers.
Yep. Absolutely. Bernie really should have been president in 2016. America would have been so much better off. Okay, this is how German police treats people speaking out against genocide and war. Yeah, that was footage from a anti-war and anti-genocide protest in Cologne, Germany. So yeah. Okay. Chinese leader Xi Jinping, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi seen chatting and share a laugh at the second day of the Shanghai Cooperation Summit, Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, at the Chinese port city of Tianjin. Yeah, Trump has really fucked over the U.S. Being the little bitch he is, he's fucked over the nation. And I honestly can't blame anything. Look otherwise. Fuck you. It's not a good person. Far too much to just overlook. Tennessee farmer confronts GOP representative. I'm about to lose my farm. Take your head out of Trump's ass. Sure it's not a Missouri farmer? I mean, I know western Tennessee borders eastern Missouri, but still. Seeing that he's a Missouri rep.
A great-great-grandfather helped open this university. I am pissed, and I'm pissed at you because I have emailed you because it's easier for me than to try to talk on the phone without profanity. I would appreciate you taking your father's U.S. Constitution book, read it, study it, make your own lines underneath it, and get Trump out of office. The man is a dictator. He knows nothing about what he talks about. I listened to him for about a half hour today, and I got sick at all the lies he brought up. Now, I'm about ready to lose my farm. Do you know why? I'm sure you don't know why.
Lose your what, sir?
Farm.
Farm?
Yeah.
Why is that, sir?
Because Missouri does not have wills. They have trust. They have legal zigzags. And a trust most people don't know anything about. So I'm dealing with a state that's a crooked state, doesn't care about what farmers happen. The only reason why we have farmers today is because the federal government funds them. How much money of our tax money?
Yeah. I don't think a lot of people realize how expensive it is to be a farmer for a living. Especially with all these businesses able to drive them out of business. For having lower prices. Because when you have more access to certain things, yeah. Cheaper access, you can send out cheaper prices, especially if you have a larger supply of things you can work with. Yeah. It really is just, it's disgusting that this happens. It's why so many farms anymore are becoming owned by these large conglomerations, and the small farmers are slowly being strangled out of farming. And Trump's not helping it. Not one fucking bit.
Goes to farmers. Farmers work very hard, but they're funded by the federal government, not by selling groceries. That's what Foster Farms and all of those characters, that's where they get their money. The price of steaks, $20 a pound, because of big business. You want to straighten out the budget? Start taxing corporations and the wealthy, like we've been telling you. Do you think we're idiots? Do you think we don't pay taxes? Do you think that we don't have to make budgets? You talk about half-truths when I listen to you. You know nothing about taking care of children because you've always had a really good-paying job. You know nothing about what a working-class citizen does. Come down here. Come down here and start trying to pay your medical insurance. Come down here and walk into Costco to try to feed your family, to feed your kid that's moved out, to feed your great-grandchildren. I had a very good job in California, and I'm able to feed my family, and it goes all the way to great-grandchildren. You're not helping me. Believe me, you're not helping me. You need to take your head out of Trump's ass and start doing your representation of us.
Get him. Exactly. Last thing for tonight's news. Yeah, this one is just, it's disturbing. Eyes on Ice. They tried to sneak out 600 children. Not just immigrants. Children. Over the holiday weekend.
Picture this. It's the middle of a holiday weekend. The kind of time when most people are unplugged with family, not watching the news, but behind the scenes, the government was loading children, unaccompanied Guatemalan minors, onto planes. 600 of them. Kids as young as 6 and 7 years old, ripped out of their beds in the middle of the night and told they are being sent back. But here's what they didn't expect. Lawyers scrambled, raced into courts on a Sunday morning and got a judge to stop it. So the planes were grounded. In one case, kids were actually taken off the plane and returned to custody. The judge made it clear you don't get to bypass law and deport kids without due process. And think about this. They tried to do it on a holiday weekend so the story wouldn't break. Major networks might bury it, but independent creators, people like me and others on this app, are shining the light where they don't want it. 600 children, 600 lives. And without that court order, they'd already be gone. This is why we pay attention. This is why independent voices matter, because when the government tries to sneak something past you, we're here to make sure that the truth gets out. So follow me for more, because this fight is far from over.
So yeah, it's just trying to, over the Labor Day weekend, deport 600 children. Not just immigrants in general, just immigrant children. That's how fucking disgusting Trump and his entire fucking administration is. There needs to be serious repercussions. Serious repercussions for all this. Like I've said before, there needs to be a Nuremberg level trial held for the Trump administration and the Republican Party. But we'll go ahead and end this episode there. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my links and sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.